let's start. So good afternoon. I formally declare open this unscheduled meeting of Colac Otway Shire Council, 16th of October 2024. Almighty God, we seek your blessing and guidance in our deliberations on behalf of the people of the Colac Otway Shire. Enable this council's decisions to be those that contribute to the true welfare and betterment of our community. Amen. I would like to start this afternoon by acknowledging the traditional custodians and lawmakers of this land, the elders past and present, and welcome any descendants here today. We are meeting today to consider the Colac Otway Shire Annual Report 2023-24. The agenda only includes this one item and therefore we are meeting online. For anyone in the audience who may be watching our meeting, you will note that our agenda doesn't include public question time because this meeting is taking place during the election period. This also means that officers' ability to respond to questions from councillors is also limited and hopefully not necessary at all. Councillors are already aware of the requirements for them to conduct themselves in accordance with our election period policy, limiting commentary to the matter under consideration and abstaining from any conduct or commentary that may influence the upcoming election. Please be advised that this meeting is recorded and live streamed, and the recording of this afternoon's meeting will be available on the website as soon as practicable. I note that 6 councillors are present at the meeting. Are there any declarations of interest? No declarations of interest. Thank you. Now we move on to the item in the agenda. Item 6.1, Colac Otway Shire Annual Report 2023-24. The purpose of this report is to present the Colac Otway Shire Council's annual report for 23-24. Councillors, the CEO has already confirmed to us in writing that there have been 2 minor issues identified in the document attached to today's agenda. One is a small amount of redundant text in a table and the other is an incorrect label on a table. These administrative corrections will be made prior to the final document before the annual report is published or printed. Before I ask for a motion, I will provide councillors an opportunity to ask a question of officers. Please note again that this should only be if the question needs to be raised before we consider a motion and should be carefully presented due to caretaker provisions applying. I will exercise my discretion as chair to limit questions if needed. Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Councillor Arnott.
I'd like to move a motion consistent with the officer's recommendation that the council receives and notes the Colac Otway Shire Council's annual report 2023 to 2024 as per attachment 1. And notes that the final designated copy will be published on the council website and a copy made available in the council's customer service centres.
Thanks, Councillor Arnott. Is it to be seconded? Councillor Costin. Thank you. I will now ask the mover to speak to the motion. Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mayor White. It's with pleasure that I have the opportunity to speak to this motion. It actually shows that the council is in a very good position and has got good news to report for the year. And I'd like to commend it to our community. It by significant recognition to the capacity and value of our employees to our organisation. Our workforce is what delivers things to our community, but councillors do not do anything. We make decisions on behalf of the community, but we need employees to actually enact those on our behalf. So make no mistake about that. I think that can be highlighted in a couple of areas of the report. A very, very simple one is the inspections done on our health inspections or food inspections done on premises. It's shifted from under half of those completed to now 100%. And that's due to having the reliable staff on hand. We also can show that whilst there is a deficit in the annual report of financial of about 5.4 million, that needs to be, I think, explained for the community to understand where that comes from. There's a bit over $14 million in depreciation schedule within that report, If you take that out, obviously that would change that substantially. We would have a substantial surplus, but that would be a distortion in itself also. So we need to then come back to what's causing this. The reality is that most of the causation, if you like, is simply a timing of around about a week. $7.4 million in financial assistance grants, which normally come in June in the year, actually arrived in July this year. So that $7.4 million would have had us result in a surplus of a bit over $2 million if it had have come in as per the budget expectation, but it did not. In the end, it still leaves council in a very, very strong position. We are now in a circumstance where we are fully cashed reserved for all of the circumstances we require reserves for. We are fully cashed for the operations that we need to expend our money on for the previous year, for those things that are still yet to be completed. And we have the cash in the bank now with these grants and other reserves the council has to equip for all of our liabilities for the coming year. And that's not a circumstance that the council has been in every year. And on top of that, council has no debt. There are no liabilities to this council that need to be immediately paid for. There are those liabilities that council do have to face in the future. That's why we have reserves for them. That's why we have over $20 million in the bank account, earned a bit over $1 million in interest for the Shire last year. That meant we were able to do another $1 million worth of works for our Shire. And in doing so, we actually delivered a bit over $10 million of capital works for the Shire. And that's detailed in the report within what you've seen. So I think it's very, very important for people to understand how that all balances through. It's also important to, I guess, make sure people understand the importance of employees and where they sit. Approximately half of the revenue of the Shire over time comes from other than rates. And it's that half of the revenue which actually pays for most of the employees. It's work that they must do for people. And that the simplest examples of that is the maternal health and welfare services, our aged care at home, looking after the aged people, youth services, NDIS, the Apollo Bay airfield, and even the Apollo Bay harbour, whilst we still have that. And of course, we've handed that to Gorkappa, but it is in this last report. All those things have got their salaries and wages for those employees paid for, not from rates, but from grants and fees that we receive along the way. So I think that amounts to, even if you add all of that in, that amounts to about 43% of our total revenue. So far more than half of our revenue actually goes to deliver services for our community, to improve the assets, to improve things so that we can continue to live in a wonderful society. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Arnott. Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I'd like to thank officers for preparing this report on behalf of councillors as we draw near to the end of this council term. Annual reports, by their very nature, are written with rose-coloured glasses, and no one wants to report bad news. And unfortunately, in the caretaker period, councillors have had limited opportunity to have in-depth discussions on what's in this report. I'm not saying there are many excellent achievements, and they're all outlined in this report, and that's great. And Councillor Arnott has highlighted some also. But I'll just highlight a couple of areas which I hope will be addressed by the new council. We have a substantial backlog in our projects at the moment. These projects are already funded, not being implemented. I would hope that the new council would work closely with officers to reduce this backlog so that we can get those projects out and built and improve services for our community. There's another section in the report which talks about our community satisfaction survey. Unfortunately, we have a decreasing level of satisfaction, which we'll need to address. And it does follow, it's largely consistent with state trends, but we do need to address this. What's not mentioned, however, is the consistently lower level of dissatisfaction, consistently lower level of satisfaction expressed by our coastal communities. This is a challenge that will face our new council to understand why this is and to respond accordingly to our coastal residents and ratepayers who, as we know, contribute over 1/3 of our rate revenue. There's a section on page 106 where we talk about our financial sustainability indicators. Some of these have been impacted by the financial assistance grants, the late payment of the financial assistance grants. Others, however, haven't been. The capital replacement ratio, for example, hasn't been impacted, but is still classified as high risk and will need to be addressed. On the other hand, our indebtedness ratio is, for me, sitting far too comfortably in the conservative low risk category. To me, this means that council is not making its rates income work hard enough. While we may say it's great to have no debts, no loans, no borrowings, there are others who say, and I agree with them, no debts, no loans, no borrowings, no vision. We should be looking at a loans program, a responsible loans program, to build infrastructure, expand our services for those who will use those services and pay for them now through their rates. The days of saving up our rates and tucking money away into reserves to build new infrastructure or
time. 30 seconds, Councillor Costin.
Thank you.
Sorry, thank you.
Finally, I'd like to thank all the officers for their friendship and support during my term on council and for their tolerance in responding to my many questions on their reports and projects. I see it as an important role for councillors to ask questions of officers, and sometimes that requires councillors to be quite robust and persistent in their questions, but that's what the community expects. But thank you to all officers.
Thanks, Councillor Costin. Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I am pleased to receive and note the Colac Otway Shire annual report. I take on board some of the comments by Councillor Costin, which are quite correct. Optimistic about the new council and improving our community customer satisfaction survey and getting some projects done. But the detail in this report highlights that we did do some things for the last 12 months, and I'm quite proud of a lot of the things that the Shire has achieved over that time. I really want to thank all the staff who have worked so diligently for us across the 12 months. You can see the fruits of their labour detailed in this report, from the CEO down to our part-time staff. Everyone does try their best for this council, and there's some good news in this report. I want to thank everyone sincerely, thank my fellow councillors, and I'm optimistic about the future.
Thanks, Councillor Potter. Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. Just briefly, I would like to thank the officers both for preparing the report and also the officers that have done much work that is reflected in the annual report. I think that it's worth reminding ourselves that this reflects a report up to 30th of June 2024, which is, of course, about the middle of winter. And whilst I acknowledge that it's important that you get projects done as soon as practical, as soon as possible, the reality is that many projects will go over financial years. The reality is that in the Otways in particular, doing construction type works in the middle of winter doesn't make sense. So I don't share the concern about carryovers at 30th of June to the extent of some others, simply because the annual report ends on 30th of June, and the realities of the weather, particularly in the southern part of the Shire, is that many construction projects will be over a financial year, which reflects real physical constraints and doesn't necessarily mean a problem in itself, provided, of course, those funds are there. And as Councillor Arnott has pointed out, the funds are there. The funds are there for those projects that haven't been completed. And when you already have constraints in completing capital projects, it really doesn't make sense to borrow more money to buy to do projects when you already have unfinished projects that have cash reserves available to complete them.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Any other councillor wish to speak? No other councillor wishes to speak. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? Councillor Hart, Councillor Arnott, Councillor Potter, Councillor Hanson, Councillor Costin. The motion is carried 6-0. Thank you, councillors. That concludes our meeting for the Colac Otway Shire. I declare the meeting closed. Thank you, everybody, for your attendance.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.